Slide guitar is what we're going to talk about today on the Riff Connection. And I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview on slide guitar and a few ideas. And in upcoming videos, I think we'll look at some more actual specific riffs. But for now, I'll just give you a few ideas. I love slide guitar because it allows you to really play some nice expressive kind of sounds, you know. You can use your vibrato to get some really nice sort of sounds. And vibrato on slide guitar is a really important part of the technique. And most of the players that people like to listen to have a very unique type of vibrato. Each player sort of has their own style of vibrato. And slide guitar goes back a long ways. I don't know how far back it goes and exactly, but you can hear the Mississippi blues players do it. Robert Johnson and Son House, Charlie Patton, all kinds of different guys back in those days were sort of the pioneers of it. Later on, you got into the guys that they influenced, such as Duane Allman. I hear a lot of blues harmonica licks in what he does, or did, I should say. And then, of course, you got Johnny Winter. You've got all kinds of other guys, too. Rory Gallagher, Ry Cooder. You hear David Gilmour from Pink Floyd do some fantastic lap steel playing, which is a similar kind of thing. There's been so many great players over the years. One of my favorites is Sonny Landreth, and he sort of combines a really traditional approach with some really innovative techniques that really had never been done before until him. But anyways, getting to the playing part, actually the last thing I'll say about that is you should just go on to the internet and you can Google slide players if you're not familiar with a bunch already, and you can listen to all kinds of great players. I've omitted a lot. There's just too many to mention them all. Also, I should say, though, there is a different school of playing, too. There's the blues-based playing, and then I think there's also like a more melodic-based group of players. For instance, George Harrison, his playing was much more based on melodic things as opposed to blues licks and different variations on the blues licks. And Lowell George, I think, would go into that category. And Dickie Betts, I thought he was a very melodic slide player. Okay, so getting on to the slide playing, you got lots of options for sounds and different ways of doing things. The slide itself, you can use different types of slides. This is glass. I like glass. I also like metal. You can get steel slides and or chrome slides, and you can get brass ones and ceramic ones. I like them all. They all sound a little different. That's just up to your liking, whatever you prefer. And some slides sound better on certain guitars than they do on others, so it's just a personal preference. You can play with your fingers. That sort of thing, using your fingers. Or you can use a pick and your fingers. I use that a lot too. I like both ways. The pick is great because if I'm playing slide guitar licks and I want to switch off and do just regular playing, then I can do that by just using the pick. So, for instance, if I wanted to do that's that kind of thing. You can do both things that way. You can do it with your fingers too, I guess, but that works better for me if I want to do regular picking interspersed with the slide. So you can, or you could just use a flat pick if you wanted to. The main thing you got to do with your right hand is you've got to get the muting of the strings down, because when you're putting a hard object on those strings, you get a lot of resonance and a lot of things rattling around, a lot of metal on, metal rattling against metal and stuff, and it'll sound really terrible if you don't mute. So, for instance, if you use your fingers, it might be easier for you because you can lay your hand on the strings and you're basically muting all the strings. And then what you've got to do is just sort of whatever string it is you're focusing on, or strings, then you can sort of lift your hand a little bit off that part. But I've got my hand laying across the strings so they're all not ringing. You might want them all to ring sometimes. For instance, if you're using an open tuning, which I'll get to here in a second. So anyways, if you want to use a pick and your fingers, the same thing applies. You've got to mute those strings with your right hand. Keep all the extra noise from, especially at high volume with some distortion. It gets really nasty sounding, which can be good. Sonny Landreth utilizes all kinds of overtones and things when he plays. For instance, the other part of the muting, which is very important, is with your left hand. You need to lay your fingers across those strings behind the slide so you don't get a whole lot of noise back there too. So you want to deaden this part of the string. Sonny Landreth, of course, uses that part of the string for all kinds of neat techniques. And so that the two parts of the muting are right and left hand. It's hard for me to explain specifically how to do that, but if you just listen as you're experimenting, you'll find out, pretty quickly how to go about doing that to keep things under control. So what's the next thing? Muting is really important. Tunings are really kind of cool. I'm using a standard tuning here because I like standard tuning. If I could only use one tuning for slide guitar, I would use standard tuning. And that's just because I know standard tuning better. I know exactly where the notes are and stuff like that. I don't play open tunings that much, except for my own amusement kind of thing around the house. So every tuning is going to sound different. You're going to have a totally different kind of flavor from each tuning. For instance, let me switch guitars. Some people play in open tunings all the time. For instance, Derek Trucks, he's a fantastic slide player. He uses an open E tuning, I believe. Dwayne Allman used an open tuning. I think it was an E also, maybe. Could be wrong with that. So this is an open E tuning. And you can hear that distinctive sound that it gives you when you use the open tuning. There's all kinds of different tunings. I would suggest go to Sonny Landreth's website, and on his website there's a section on tunings where they list a whole bunch of different tunings that he uses, because he uses a lot of tunings. He tunes, sometimes he'll use a different tuning for every song pretty much. I think open E might be his main tuning, but you can go there, or anyway, you can do a search on the internet and find 1,000 sites that'll tell you all about guitar tunings that you can use for bottleneck. So the tunings give you a whole bunch of options for getting more traditional sounds. So that's the basic idea of what you can do. I guess something that's really important is when you're playing, you need to be able to grab more than one string at a time, because to get a lot of the nicer sounding voicings and stuff, you want to be able to hit like 2 or 3 strings at a time. So I'm an open tuning, so what I'm doing here is I'm just playing that little E major triad. And by playing it with my fingers, pick, I'm using my pick, my pick and my middle finger and my third finger. Doing kind of a banjo roll kind of thing. You can do it with your fingers without a pick as well. So for setting up your guitar for playing slide, that's another thing. On this guitar, I've got it set up specifically for a slide. So I've got heavy strings on it. Like they're like 13 to 50 something or other, 56 maybe. And that works great for me because the action's also a little higher, because that way the slide isn't rattling against the neck. There's enough tension on the strings and they're high enough. Plus you get a nice tone out of those heavy strings. But some people like a low action. I've read, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've read from several sources, like Derek Trucks uses a relatively low action on his guitar. And so therefore he must have a very light touch, because otherwise that slide would be rattling against the neck of your guitar. So anyways, without rambling on forever and ever about this stuff, next time I'll have a few licks for you. For now, the main thing to do when you want to practice some slide, here's a good way to get used to it. To get used to playing this technique if you're not used to it already. It's all about being accurate with your pitch. So your most important tool is going to be your ears. So as opposed to looking where that slide is all the time, you know, it's going to be right over the frets if you do, you know, look at it. But use your ears. So you might want to play an open string. Give yourself a reference there. And just use your ears and practice playing notes. Now, what you can do to help your accuracy is take your slide. I wear it on my little finger. I like to wear it on my little finger because that way I've got my fingers in behind the slide that I can use for different things, like playing chords or playing single note stuff. Some people like to use it on their third finger because it allows them to angle the slide to get that interval. There's always advantages to everything you do. For me, this works really well. And it allows me, as I say, to do things behind the slide a little bit too. So here's an example of a little exercise you could practice. What you're going to do is play like an E major bar chord up at the 12th fret. Actually, I'm playing like an E7 here, but look at that, play that chord and look at that shape, okay? So you can play scales with the slide. This helps you mute too. This will help you mute the strings. If you don't mute, then you'll have a whole lot of notes ringing out. But in this case, you want the notes to be fairly distinct. So let's start on the A string, 12th fret. And we're going to go 12th fret, 14th. Then we're going to go to the D string, 12th fret, 14th, and on up like that. So you can... Now I'm going to the G string, 12th fret. Up to the B string. There's that D note on your B string. So the idea is not to just get hung up on playing sort of your stock licks like that, because that's the kind of thing that will come after a while. But if you want to go past that kind of thing and get a little bit more accuracy with your playing, then practice playing like single notes like that. Take your time, stop on the notes, and add some vibrato. And the vibrato can be whatever feels good to you. Every player has their own sort of style of vibrato that sounds great. Eric Clapton has a fantastic vibrato. It's very unique to him. Yngwie Malmsteen has an incredibly good vibrato. It's very different though. It's extremely wide vibrato. So it's whatever sounds good to you. And maybe whatever kind of music you're playing. Some stuff might sound better with a nice side to side kind of more subtle vibrato. But anyways, that's all up to your personal choice, what you want to do, what your slide's made out of, what finger you put it on, whether you use your fingers or fingers and a pick or just a pick or whatever the case may be. That's totally up to you, and you'll have a lot of fun playing slide and experimenting with different stuff. So anyways, I've rambled on long enough about that stuff. So next time around, we're gonna look at probably some more slides guitar stuff. Maybe we'll look at some slide licks that some guys do who aren't using a slide, like Jimmy Herring. He does some fantastic slide guitar licks using the vibrato bar on his guitar. He said there's no point in trying to play slide when there's people like Derek Trucks around. And Jeff Beck's another guy. He does some fantastic slide guitar licks using the whammy bar on his guitar. So we might look at some of that stuff too. Anyways, thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you again soon.